The shadow swept across the Pacific like an eternal eclipse, dimming the sun and casting a cold, unexplainable fear across the world. When the broadcast began, every screen flickered to life with a terrifying message: surrender your world or be consumed. Humanity had no idea what was coming, but it was worse than extinction. It was farming. In the chaos that followed, one man saw through the veil, a recluse with a brilliant mind. His name? Elias Grant. His plan? The Misfire Protocol. Now, as the world begins to recover from the VXUS invasion, a new mystery emerges. Elias has vanished without a trace. What was he hiding, and what happens when the enemy returns better prepared and more deadly than before? The first sign of the VXUS invasion was not a blast of sound or an explosion, but an ominous shadow that stretched across the Pacific Ocean like an eclipse that would not end. It was not a shadow cast by a celestial body, but by something much more terrifying, an enormous, otherworldly presence that blotted out the sun, causing the light to fade and the warmth to disappear. The world's inhabitants watched in disbelief as their once vibrant skies were darkened, and the comforting rays of the sun were consumed by the cold outline of something impossibly vast. This dark presence hovered above the earth with an eerie stillness, a foreboding sign of the invasion to come. When the broadcast began, it wasn't the usual news anchor or government figure speaking. Instead, every screen across the globe flickered to life simultaneously with a chilling, alien message. A towering insectoid figure appeared, its form unlike anything the human eye had ever seen. The creature was monstrous, its gleaming mandibles clicking in what might have been a sign of aggression or dominance. Its eyes were molten gold, burning with an intensity that seemed to pierce through the very souls of viewers. This leader of the invaders, the first glimpse humanity had of the VXUS, spoke in a voice so powerful that it seemed to shake the very bones of those who heard it. The message was brief, but it carried a terrifying weight. We are the VXUS. Surrender your world or be consumed. The unsettling calm in the creature's tone was matched by the gravity of its words. The broadcast didn't just inform, it demanded. The very nature of the message made it clear that resistance would be futile. The alien leader's declaration was not one of negotiation or diplomacy, but of total subjugation. It was an ultimatum: surrender or face annihilation. Humanity, unprepared for such an invasion, was left in a state of shock. The sheer scale of the alien presence, the appearance of the VXUS ships, and the cold finality of their leader's words left the world frozen in fear. This was not a typical conflict with some distant adversary. This was a battle for survival, and it was clear that the VXUS were not here to coexist but to dominate or destroy. The stage was set for a cataclysmic confrontation. The VXUS broadcast triggered an unprecedented wave of panic across the globe. Humanity, already dealing with the uncertainty of a complex and interconnected world, was now confronted with an existential threat. The message, delivered by the towering insectoid leader, shattered any illusion of safety. In an instant, the world's population was thrown into chaos, scrambling to comprehend the reality of an invasion that seemed beyond their ability to fight or even understand. The sheer scale and certainty of the threat left no room for doubt. Humanity was not dealing with a rogue nation or natural disaster, but with an intelligent, technologically advanced force capable of unimaginable destruction. Governments and international bodies reacted swiftly, though their actions were more driven by fear and confusion than by organized strategy. Martial law was declared in dozens of countries, a desperate attempt to maintain order in a world that seemed on the brink of collapse. Military forces were immediately mobilized, though their responses were more symbolic than effective. Fighter jets scrambled into the sky, missiles were launched, and defense systems went into overdrive, but none of these human-made measures had any discernible effect. The VXUS ships, floating like monoliths above the earth, were impervious to anything humanity had to offer. The initial response was a mix of defiance and desperation, as leaders clung to the hope that they could fend off this invasion. But the invaders' technology made it clear that human efforts were futile. The VXUS ships hovered silently, imposing and enormous, unaffected by any of the human weapons. Nuclear warheads, the pinnacle of mankind's destructive capabilities, vanished mid-flight, their trajectories altered or intercepted by the VXUS forces. EMP, electromagnetic pulse, bursts, a last-ditch effort to disable electronic systems, fell short of their target. In a bizarre twist, even the most skilled hackers who attempted to breach the VXUS systems found themselves overwhelmed by security protocols that were so sophisticated they might as well have been trying to outthink a deity. Their efforts were completely futile, leaving the world's defense forces scrambling for alternatives that simply didn't exist. This initial period of panic and confusion served as a stark reminder of humanity's vulnerability in the face of an enemy that was not only technologically superior, but also seemingly indifferent to human attempts to resist. The VXUS were not interested in negotiating or establishing dominance through conventional warfare tactics. They simply demonstrated their power and control, and the world watched as their overwhelming strength reduced human defenses to mere gestures in the face of true power. The sense of helplessness spread quickly, exacerbated by the fact that there was no clear path forward for any of humanity's existing military or political structures. What had seemed like the peak of human achievement, the ability to launch missiles, deploy advanced fighter jets, or control satellites, now seemed like a distant memory in the face of an alien presence that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying in its superiority. As the invasion progressed, the VXUS began their assault on Earth in a cold, calculated manner. At first, the destruction appeared random. Cities fell, but rural areas were spared. The seemingly erratic pattern of devastation left many human observers confused, struggling to understand the invaders' logic. It wasn't long, however, before a terrifying realization began to take shape. The VXUS weren't simply obliterating human civilization for the sake of dominance. They were working according to a highly organized strategy. Every action, every targeted city, seemed like part of a larger plan that humans could not yet comprehend. The method of destruction employed by the VXUS was chilling in its precision. The VXUS ships hovered above Earth, unleashing devastating beams of red light that cut through steel and concrete like paper. Entire cities were leveled in moments, leaving nothing but smoldering ruins in their wake. Unlike the random chaos of traditional warfare, where collateral damage and unpredictability are common, the VXUS strikes appeared controlled and deliberate. This was no bombing campaign aimed at creating mass casualties. This was surgical, precise annihilation. The very structure of cities, which had been built up over centuries, was ripped apart without hesitation, as if the VXUS had no more emotional investment in their destruction than someone tearing down an old building to make room for something new. As time passed, experts and civilians alike began to analyze the patterns of destruction. What initially seemed like random devastation soon revealed itself to be far more systematic. Entire metropolises, some of the most densely populated and technologically advanced regions in the world, were razed to the ground, while more remote, rural areas remained untouched. At first, there were theories about why certain locations were targeted over others. Some speculated that the VXUS were simply showing their power, making an example out of the world's most powerful cities in an attempt to break the human spirit. But over time, it became evident that there was an even more chilling reason for this targeted destruction. The VXUS weren't just aiming for destruction. They were creating an environment that allowed them to manage and control the human population. Cities, with their infrastructure and population density, became the pens in which humanity would be contained. The VXUS were methodically clearing out human-held territory, creating a series of routes and containment zones where the remnants of humanity could be herded. In these zones, humans would be easily monitored, controlled, and ultimately harvested. Their precision in targeting cities suggested an understanding of human infrastructure, making it clear that the VXUS were no ordinary invaders. They were planners, operating with a far more complex objective than simple destruction. This methodical destruction of cities wasn't just a sign of the VXUS's power. It was a terrifying glimpse into their true intentions. They were not here to conquer the Earth in the traditional sense. They were not looking to enslave humanity for the sake of domination or to assert control over Earth's resources. Instead, they were clearing the path for something far more insidious. The Earth was being prepared, not for war, but for a new kind of farming operation, a scale of manipulation and control so vast that it defied comprehension. Cities were not destroyed out of malice. They were destroyed because they were no longer necessary. What the VXUS needed was control over the human population, and to achieve that, they needed to reshape the world into a carefully managed environment where people could be monitored, contained, and eventually harvested. This revelation, when it eventually surfaced, sent shockwaves throughout the global population. Humans were no longer in control of their world. They were simply livestock awaiting their fate. The key to understanding the VXUS invasion came not from military leaders, scientists, or strategists, but from an unexpected source, Elias Grant, a reclusive former game developer with a deep interest in conspiracy theories. While world governments scrambled for answers and military leaders struggled to contain the VXUS onslaught, Elias, who had been watching the invasion unfold from his messy, isolated apartment, was able to piece together a startling hypothesis. In a moment of clarity that would change the course of human resistance, he realized that the VXUS weren't here to wipe out humanity. They were here to manage and exploit it. Elias saw what others could not. Humanity was being treated like cattle. His insight came as he observed the strategic destruction of cities and the movement of refugees. While everyone else was focused on the random devastation, Elias noticed patterns in the way the VXUS were operating. Certain cities were targeted, others were left intact, and there seemed to be a deliberate effort to herd survivors into specific zones. These zones were heavily monitored, and the people within them were being controlled with an eerie level of precision. Elias understood that this wasn't random destruction. It was all part of a farming operation. The cities were pens, and rural areas served as grazing lands. This horrifying realization led Elias to one conclusion. Humanity was not being exterminated. They were being managed, and eventually harvested. Elias's theory initially seemed far-fetched, even ludicrous. The idea that the VXUS were farming humans was too grim, too dehumanizing for many to accept. Most people couldn't wrap their heads around the concept of humanity being reduced to livestock, even if the evidence pointed to this brutal truth. But Elias wasn't easily deterred. He started posting his findings on multiple online forums, where he detailed what he saw as containment cycles and farming routes that the VXUS were using to control human populations. At first, his posts were met with skepticism and mockery, but as more footage of the invasion came in, showing human caravans being funneled through controlled corridors and drones hovering above them without firing, people began to listen. The more they saw, the more they realized that Elias's theory was not just a paranoid delusion. It was the disturbing reality they were all facing. As the evidence mounted, Elias's description of humanity as cattle began to gain traction. In one of his most widely viewed live streams, he boldly declared that cities were pens, rural areas were grazing lands, and humanity was being pruned, not purged. The chilling implications of this idea quickly began to sink in. The VXUS weren't simply here to dominate. They were here to harvest. The question was no longer, can we defeat them? But when do they harvest us? This thought sent a wave of panic through the global population as the reality of their situation settled in. The VXUS were not invaders in the traditional sense. They didn't care about power, land, or resources. They cared about a much darker commodity: human lives. Elias's discovery was a turning point in the fight for survival. It wasn't just an intellectual breakthrough, it sparked a global movement. People from all over the world began to see the pattern for themselves, and the realization that humanity was being farmed by the VXUS galvanized the resistance. This idea wasn't merely a call to arms. It was a call to change the very way humanity thought about the invasion. The focus shifted from trying to defeat an overwhelming enemy through conventional means to understanding how the VXUS had structured their operations. Understanding that they were managing humanity as livestock led to a radical shift in strategy, Fighting back wasn't just about using weapons. It was about disrupting the entire system that the VXUS had created. This new understanding of the invasion, courtesy of Elias Grant, gave humanity a new hope, a chance to fight back on their own terms, by undermining the very infrastructure the VXUS had built to control them. After Elias Grant's unsettling discovery that the VXUS were farming humanity, the next step in humanity's resistance was to find a way to fight back against the alien invaders' control system. Elias, with his background in game development and a deep understanding of algorithms and systems, conceived an audacious plan that would change the course of the war: the Misfire Protocol. The Misfire Protocol was based on an unconventional, yet brilliantly simple concept: disrupt the VXUS's precise scheduling system. Elias understood that the VXUS's dominance came from their ability to perfectly synchronize every action and movement. Their ships, drones, and strikes weren't just advanced. They were precisely timed, each step choreographed to maintain control over humanity. From the timing of their attacks to the management of human containment zones, the entire invasion depended on perfect synchronization. Every VXUS ship hovered in place based on a calculated schedule, and every drone patrolled specific areas according to set intervals. Elias theorized that if humanity could somehow break this synchronization, the VXUS would be unable to maintain their grip on the planet. It was like a machine that relied on a finely tuned clock. If you broke the clock, the machine would falter. His plan didn't involve launching missiles or hacking into the VXUS's mainframes. It wasn't a grand technological weapon or a physical attack. It was something far more subtle and insidious. Elias proposed flooding the VXUS's scheduling system with false data: garbage timestamps, recursive loops, and infinite countdowns. The idea was to create a chaotic network of information that would clog the VXUS's systems, rendering their timing algorithms useless. By scrambling their schedules, the VXUS would lose their ability to coordinate and control their operations effectively. A delay of a few seconds here, a missed timing there, and the VXUS's once flawless operations would crumble. The brilliance of the Misfire Protocol lay in its simplicity. The VXUS were not just technologically superior. They were dependent on their technological superiority. Their strategies relied on predictability and precision. If that precision was disrupted, they would be vulnerable. Elias knew that this was the key to humanity's survival, but he also understood the risks involved. Disrupting the VXUS's systems wasn't just a matter of throwing together some code. It was an act of defiance against an alien power far beyond humanity's capabilities. If it failed, the consequences could be catastrophic. But if it worked, humanity would gain the upper hand for the first time since the invasion began. Elias shared his idea with a select group of hackers, programmers, and coders from across the globe. These individuals, many of whom had previously been focused on survival rather than resistance, rallied behind Elias's plan. The Misfire Protocol became a rallying cry for humanity's fight back against the VXUS. It was an all-or-nothing gamble. The operation required every human-connected network to send a flood of false data to the VXUS's systems. As different teams of hackers worked around the clock to create this digital storm, the world held its breath, knowing that the success of this plan was humanity's last hope. When the Misfire Protocol was finally unleashed, the effects were immediate and dramatic. The first sign of success came when a massive VXUS ship over Jakarta unexpectedly dropped from the sky. There was no explosion, no missile strike, just the silent fall of the ship as if its tether had been cut. It crashed into a skyscraper, sending shockwaves through the city. No one knew what caused the ship to fall, but Elias, watching the live stream, knew immediately. The Misfire Protocol had worked. The VXUS's system was no longer synchronized. Their once immaculate coordination was broken. The effects of the disruption were far-reaching. More ships began to fall, their movements erratic and disjointed. VXUS drones, once precise and lethal, now hovered aimlessly or collided midair due to timing errors. Their strikes, once swift and deadly, now appeared disorganized. Their once impenetrable armor of synchronization was now a vulnerability, and humanity, once powerless against the invaders, found itself in a position to strike back. For the first time in the war, the tables had turned. Military leaders, who had previously been unable to land a blow on the invaders, now had opportunities to engage. VXUS drones and ships that had once been untouchable became targets for human forces, as their defenses were weakened by the chaos in their systems. The success of the misfire protocol transformed humanity's defensive posture into an offensive one, giving the resistance a fighting chance. The disruption caused by the misfire protocol didn't just weaken the VXUS's immediate hold over Earth. It changed the course of the entire conflict. The first victory against the VXUS wasn't won with weapons. It was won by disrupting the very system that had allowed them to dominate. The misfire protocol didn't just give humanity a chance at survival. It proved that there was hope. The fight was no longer about being victims of a technologically superior foe. It was about reclaiming control over the systems that the VXUS had relied upon. In that moment, Elias Grant's vision of resistance became reality, marking the beginning of a new phase in the war. A phase where humanity was no longer just trying to survive, but fighting back with the tools they had at hand. The success of the misfire protocol was nothing short of revolutionary. It marked a turning point in the battle between humanity and the VXUS invaders. With the VXUS's carefully orchestrated plans thrown into disarray, the global resistance found itself empowered in ways that were previously unimaginable. For the first time since the invasion began, the VXUS were not invincible, and humanity was no longer at the mercy of a far superior enemy. This newfound opportunity led to a dramatic shift in the human response, sparking a global counterattack that would change the course of the war. As the VXUS struggled to regain control over their disintegrating operations, human soldiers, who had previously been little more than cannon fodder in the face of alien technology, suddenly found themselves in a position of strength. The disruption caused by the misfire protocol had left the VXUS vulnerable. Their ships and drones, once flawless in their precision, now operated erratically. VXUS fighters no longer arrived on schedule, often appearing too early or too late for their assigned strikes. Their military tactics, which relied on synchronization and flawless execution, had been crippled. The seemingly unstoppable invaders were now making mistakes, leaving openings for human forces to exploit. For human soldiers, this shift in the balance of power was a game-changer. Veteran military commanders, who had been forced to watch helplessly as their weapons failed to land even a single successful hit on the VXUS, now had targets that they could strike. The VXUS drones that had previously seemed impervious to attack were now vulnerable, exposed by their disjointed movements and delayed responses. Military units, once overwhelmed by the alien superior technology, quickly adapted to the new reality. They began hunting the VXUS forces, using guerrilla tactics to target vulnerable ships and drones. Human soldiers, emboldened by the sudden vulnerability of their enemies, fought back with newfound resolve. The VXUS, who had once moved like an unstoppable force, now found themselves playing defense. The success of the misfire protocol also had a ripple effect beyond the military. It united people around the world in a way that had never been seen before. Elias Grant's plan had been a rallying cry, inspiring hackers, engineers, coders, and scientists from all corners of the globe to contribute to the fight. These individuals, previously isolated in their efforts, now saw the possibility of success. They rallied around the misfire protocol, continuing to fine-tune and improve it. The protocol became a symbol of humanity's collective resistance, a manifestation of human ingenuity and determination. For the first time, the world was fighting together, driven by a shared goal: to break free from the grip of the VXUS and reclaim their world. The global resistance efforts became more organized. Independent militias, civilian volunteers, and military forces began to coordinate their attacks. Armed with the knowledge that the VXUS were no longer perfectly synchronized, resistance forces launched widespread strikes on the invaders' remaining strongholds. Attacks on VXUS command centers, supply chains, and communication hubs became more frequent and increasingly successful. The once untouchable VXUS ships, once scattered and impossible to hit, were now falling from the sky with alarming regularity. Military analysts began to calculate the toll the misfire protocol was taking on the VXUS. Ships were being brought down, drones were being destroyed, and their operations were grinding to a halt. Humanity was finally on the offensive, and the VXUS were no longer the impenetrable force they had once been. Even beyond military efforts, civilian resistance played a significant role. With the knowledge that the VXUS relied on synchronization to control the population, activists and hackers continued to disrupt the Invaders' systems, preventing them from re-establishing order. Cities that had once been under complete VXUS control were now centers of resistance, as everyday people took part in the fight, hacking into systems, rerouting supply chains, and sabotaging VXUS infrastructure. As the world came together in this unprecedented counterattack, it became clear that the misfire protocol was not just a technological weapon, it had sparked a global movement. The rebellion against the VXUS was no longer confined to a small group of hackers or military elites. It had grown into a worldwide, coordinated resistance. While the resistance began to turn the tide, the fight was far from over. The VXUS were still an incredibly advanced and formidable enemy, and their retreat was not out of fear or desperation. It was strategic. The misfire protocol had caused enough disruption that the VXUS were forced to retreat and regroup, but they were not defeated. Their retreat was methodical, and they had the technology and resources to come back stronger. Even as they withdrew, they were already working to adapt, learning from the chaos that the misfire protocol had unleashed. However, for the first time, humanity had proven that it could fight back, and the success of the misfire protocol signaled that the invaders were not invincible. In the aftermath of the first phase of the counterattack, humanity had achieved a major victory, but it was also aware of the VXUS's adaptability. As world leaders celebrated the temporary retreat of the VXUS, Elias Grant remained cautious. He understood that the battle was far from over. The VXUS would eventually return, but next time, they would be prepared for the chaos humanity had introduced into their systems. The success of the misfire protocol had given humanity hope, but it had also set the stage for an even more intense struggle ahead. After the successful implementation of the misfire protocol, the world witnessed a dramatic shift in the dynamics of the alien invasion. VXUS ships, once seemingly impervious to any form of human resistance, began to falter. Their impeccable synchronization and deadly precision broke down under the weight of the chaotic disruption introduced by Elias Grant's plan. For the first time, humanity seemed to gain the upper hand. VXUS drones, ships, and military operations became vulnerable, operating with delays, misfires, and disjointed movements. Despite this, the VXUS did not crumble in panic, nor did they retreat out of fear. Instead, their withdrawal was a carefully orchestrated strategic maneuver that demonstrated their ability to adapt and regain control even in the face of unexpected chaos. The retreat of the VXUS was not a sign of desperation, but a calculated decision based on their larger objectives. Despite the setbacks caused by the misfire protocol, the VXUS remained a formidable force. They had already achieved much of their primary objective, subjugating humanity and establishing their presence on Earth. The retreat indicated that they were willing to temporarily pull back and regroup, but they had not been defeated. It was clear that their invasion was part of a longer-term plan, one that extended beyond a mere military conquest. They had experienced a momentary loss of control, but their tactical awareness remained intact, allowing them to withdraw without triggering a full-scale collapse of their operation. As the ships began to lift off and rise into orbit, there was no panic in their movements. Instead, their departure was methodical and precise, just as their arrival had been. The VXUS forces seemed to have anticipated the possibility of failure or disruption, knowing that their invasion was a multi-stage process. The fact that the VXUS could continue their retreat despite the interference of the misfire protocol demonstrated their resilience and their ability to operate within tight control parameters. The withdrawal was likely a calculated move to avoid complete defeat, a regrouping phase that would give them time to reassess their strategies and overcome the disruption caused by humanity. The retreat, although a victory for humanity, also sent a chilling message. It was not an indication that the VXUS were broken or incapable of returning. Rather, it highlighted their strategic depth and understanding of warfare. Even though they were temporarily disrupted by the human counterattack, they had already set in motion their plans for the next phase. The retreat was not a surrender, but a reorganization, an opportunity for the VXUS to adapt, recalibrate, and refine their tactics. They had learned from the chaos that had been unleashed, and they were unlikely to make the same mistakes again. The global reaction to the VXUS retreat was one of mixed emotions. On one hand, there was widespread jubilation as humanity recognized that they had succeeded in driving the invaders off Earth, even if only temporarily. People celebrated the success of the misfire protocol and the emergence of a unified resistance that had managed to disrupt the VXUS's perfect synchronization. Yet there was an underlying sense of unease. The retreat of the VXUS was not a permanent victory. It was simply a shift in the battle. As the ships ascended into the sky, leaving behind their once imposing presence, there was an undeniable realization that this was not the end of the conflict, but a brief interlude before the next stage of the war. Elias Grant, the architect of the Misfire Protocol, understood the implications of the retreat far more clearly than the general public. As the world celebrated, Elias did not join in the euphoria. He sat alone in his dimly lit room, watching the VXUS ships ascend into the sky with a grave expression. To him, this was not a time for celebration, but for preparation. The VXUS would return, and when they did, they would account for the chaos that humanity had introduced into their systems. Elias's words, "They'll be back," underscored the reality that humanity was far from having won the war. While the retreat provided a brief respite, the VXUS were not finished. Their strategic withdrawal was only a temporary setback, not a defeat. Elias's understanding of the enemy's nature and their ability to adapt was an ominous reminder that the battle for Earth was far from over. Thus, the VXUS retreat was a pivotal moment in the war, marking the first time that humanity had gained a foothold in the conflict. However, it also marked the beginning of a new phase, one in which the VXUS would refine their tactics and prepare for their eventual return. The fight was far from over, and the VXUS's ability to adjust to setbacks left humanity with a sobering understanding that the war would be an ongoing struggle for survival. After the stunning success of the Misfire Protocol, which momentarily shifted the balance of power in humanity's favor, Elias Grant became both a hero and an enigma. His actions had led to a significant blow to the VXUS invasion, but despite this, Elias's personal fate took a dramatic turn. Shortly after the VXUS retreated from Earth, Elias vanished. His disappearance left many questions unanswered and sparked widespread speculation. Was it a government cover-up, an abduction by the VXUS, or something else entirely? As time passed, these theories only grew, but the truth of what happened to Elias remained a mystery. His sudden absence created a sense of unease. Had the victory been premature, and could humanity truly trust the newfound respite? Elias had been an unlikely hero. A former game developer and self-proclaimed conspiracy theorist, his insights into the VXUS's operations had made him an indispensable figure in the human resistance. His sharp understanding of patterns, algorithms, and systems had allowed him to pinpoint the flaw in the VXUS's meticulously synchronized invasion. The Misfire Protocol, which he developed, disrupted the VXUS's control systems and turned the tide of the war. Yet despite his critical role in humanity's first successful strike against the invaders, Elias remained a recluse. His lifestyle, a mixture of long hours in front of glowing screens and a disheveled home filled with takeout boxes, made him a figure of curiosity in the eyes of the public. Still, his brilliance was undeniable, and his final message to the world, "If you can't win the game, change the rules," resonated deeply with those who understood his work. The circumstances surrounding Elias's disappearance only deepened the mystery. His home was found empty, his personal belongings, including his computer and hard drives, gone. His online presence, which had been active in the fight against the VXUS, went dark. There were no clear signs of violence or forced entry into his home. To many, it seemed as though Elias had left on his own terms, vanishing into the shadows, but his reasons for doing so were unclear. Some speculated that the VXUS, in their desperate attempt to regain control over the Earth, had targeted Elias, either through abduction or an attempt to silence him permanently. Others believe that governments, now scrambling to prepare for the VXUS's eventual return, had orchestrated his disappearance to exploit his knowledge in secret. Still, there were those who thought Elias had chosen to disappear voluntarily, driven by his understanding of the greater forces at play. As the world grappled with the implications of Elias's disappearance, reports of strange, unexplained phenomena began to surface. Satellite signals, which had been thought to be static or under control, started exhibiting odd behavior. These anomalies were subtle at first, blips on radar, faint flashes in the night sky, and strange transmissions that didn't quite fit the patterns of known human or VXUS technology. The signs were dismissed by many, but for those who had followed Elias's work, it was clear that something was amiss. They began to wonder if Elias had somehow managed to go beyond the misfire protocol, building a second, more advanced system. Could he have crafted something bigger, smarter, and perhaps autonomous? A system capable of continuing the fight against the VXUS even without direct human involvement? Rumors started to circulate that Elias had gone to space, using his knowledge to create a hidden base or to continue his work in the orbiting satellites. Others speculated that he had somehow uploaded himself into a network, his consciousness dispersed across the very systems he had once hacked. These theories, while based on little more than conjecture, took on a life of their own. The idea that Elias had not only evaded capture, but had somehow extended his influence beyond the Earth captivated many. He had always been a step ahead of the rest, after all, so it seemed plausible that he might have engineered some form of escape or permanent presence in space. These rumors created a new wave of hope among those who believed that Elias might still be watching over humanity, guiding them through the invisible threads of technology he had once controlled. Despite the swirling theories and the growing belief that Elias had either hidden himself away or continued his work in secret, the fact remained that no one knew for sure where he was or what had happened to him. His final broadcast, which had ended with his ominous warning about the VXUS returning better prepared next time, lingered in the minds of the public. Elias's last words were a chilling reminder that the fight was far from over. The VXUS would return, and when they did, they would be more ready, more ruthless, and more capable of countering humanity's efforts. This statement cast a shadow over humanity's victory, suggesting that the seemingly triumphant moment was only a temporary pause in the larger, ongoing struggle for survival. What was most unsettling about Elias's disappearance was not just the absence of the man who had helped change the course of the war, but the implications it held for humanity's future. His final message was a warning that the VXUS would evolve, adapt, and return with a vengeance. Yet, it was also a call to action. Elias's knowledge, his creation of the misfire protocol, and his understanding of the VXUS's technological limitations had given humanity the edge, if only for a moment. Now, without him, the world was left with a precarious peace, a fragile understanding of the enemy, and the daunting realization that the war was far from over. His disappearance marked the beginning of a new chapter in the struggle against the VXUS, one in which humanity would need to rely on the lessons Elias had taught them, even as they faced the possibility that he might never return.